just in case. I mean, we would like to know all.
And so, 2009, I started my research as a student at Montreal College. Dr. Marciano and Dr. Lee and I have been working together for over 10 years. We built the website. The website is created to be a voice for uprooted communities, to provide knowledge and promote understanding. And I would like to thank the Preservation Society of Asheville County for sponsoring the building of the website. So I'll go ahead and get started if we can bring up the website. Okay, what I'll do is, as quickly as possible, go through the different tabs, and I'll start with the About, the homes which you're looking at. On the About, Dr. Lee, would you please? Thank you. On the About tab, if we go down to the Research tab, you can just go, and if you hover around on some of the documents that you see, it will bring up the actual content or the video. So the crossroad, Dr. Priscilla, would you click on the crossroads? The crossroads actually can open the pages and read, and I previously passed out some of the hard copies. I have about 14 or 15 here tonight if others would like copies who didn't get them. Okay, Dr. Lee, let's move on to the Gallery tab. The Gallery tab includes those who live on the South Side. This beautiful young lady in the pink is my grandmother. And if you hover over, it gives information on the pictures. Okay, can we move on to the Data tab? The Data tab includes remapping and economics. Remapping is a dream that I had. I wanted to remap the community and connect the families and the faces, so we wouldn't just be looking at parcels. We have two different categories. We have the remapping, and then we have the economic side, and we'll hear more about that. Would you please move on to the Collaborators? The Collaborators is the team, and there you'll find the different credentials. Okay, we can move on to the Reparations. We're moving pretty fast here. The Reparation tab is just different, publications, and if you click on them, it'll open those up. And it's publication information for both local and national. Okay, we move on to the blog. The blog is most current events and reports, so you can click on those and it'll open up that information. Okay, we move on to the second gallery. The second gallery is inclusive of the whole Asheville community. Professor Asheville, he's retired from UNCA. He had his class to come to the YMI Cultural Center where we collected stories from some of the elders. Okay, and let's move on to the contact. The contact tab allows individuals to present questions, comments, upload pictures, and history. And if you would like, after this presentation, you can also contact Dr. Marciano and Dr. Lee directly. Okay, we'll move on now to your presentation, Dr. Lee, who will focus on the Data tab remap.
All right, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing me. I want to introduce our map briefly. In this map, we collaboratively built this map, and there are 4 important functions in this map. The number 1 is searchability. You can search based on person name or street name. to search for any parcels that were acquired by the housing authority in the 60s and 70s. So for example, if I write down Robinson here, you can see all the parcels that has Robinson name here. Not only the owners, but also the tenants here. The second important function is the ability to see the past and the present. So if you see on the left, you see there are 4 different checkboxes. If I turn on everything, you can see the yellow and pink layer, which is coming from the Asheville website. This is city-owned properties currently. And then if I remove the checkbox, you can see the blue dots, which are 1963 city directory, which is basically all the small businesses that were present in the past, in the 60s. Remove that, you see there are clickable parcels. These are basically all the parcels that are acquired during the 60s and 70s. Removing that, you can see the urban renewal map during the 60s that was used as part of the planning. And then if I remove that, you see the current online maps here. So by clicking on and off for these different layers, you can see the past and present at the same time. The third important function is the ability to see the acquisition processes entirely. So if you look at the bottom of the website, there is a year. For now, it's 1964. And if I increase the years, you can see the color coding change, which means that it shows basically the process of acquisition processes. And then if you see on the right, at the same time in that year, you can see the number of parcels that are appraised or decided, or whether how many parcels were done with the transfer of deed, right? So you can see all these kind of analytics by moving the year bar at the bottom. And then finally, at the parcel level, you can see all the necessary information about appraiser processes. When appraiser was done, and when offer was made, when decision was made, and then when the transfer of deed happened, right? And then also you can see the appraisers' names and owners, tenants' names, and also other information such as the photos of all the scenes. And these are all coming from the UNCA special collection documents. So this is a brief introduction of the map we have built. And based on that, I think Ms. Robinson will provide some walkthrough of the maps.
Okay, so what I want to do now is to bring it right in this room. We have many Reparation Commission members the families were impacted by the implementation of urban renewal. And so, Dr. Lee, would you bring up Haynes? The last name Haynes, Haynes.
Could you say the name one more time?
Haynes, Haynes. Mr. Haynes was the owner of a grocery store that sat on the corner of Blanton Street, right across from Brown's Temple. He was able to relocate his business to the Shallow community. Showed you the information that Dr. Lee talked about previously, and for that grocery store, Mr. Haynes was given $6,000. Okay, would you now click on Old Hammond? Old Hammond, O''Hammond. Okay. So if you look, we're not going to click into the parcels this time, but if you look at the O'Hannon family, they own 247 6, 8 homes on the south side. And so that family, the old Hammond family, lost a lot of wealth, generational wealth. Okay, let's click on last name, Nance, N-A-N-C-E. Okay, this is Tommy Lee and Miss Lena Nance. Their property was acquisition, and if you look at the information, whenever you see court award, that means they fought. They fought trying to save their property, but they didn't win. The transfer of deed happened, and they were given $3,000 for their property. But they were able to repurchase a home in the community, and the relative, the daughter still lives in the home currently. Okay, Dr. Lee, do you have anything else that you want to share?
On my side, no.
Okay.
If you want to show more parcels, it's possible.
No, let's go ahead and move on to Dr. Marciano because he has more of data.
Sounds good.
Dr.
Thank you so much.
Marciano.
I will stop sharing.
Dr. Marciano?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go full screen here. If I'm not loud enough, please let me know. You're able to see this?
Yes, Dr. Marciano.
Okay, wonderful. So it's my honor and privilege to participate tonight. Our goal is to share some of the data findings with the Commission. In addition to Priscilla and Myeong, I would quickly like to acknowledge a number of collaborators who took part in a second study. Ray McCoy, Mark Conrad, Rosie Grant, Alexis Hill, Philip Nicholas, Noah Shear, and Alan Weirdak, located from Minnesota, West Virginia, California to Maryland. So these are some of the research questions we asked with input from some of the community members. Questions about who, how much, which, and when. So I'm going to go over these 7 questions, but mostly in the interest of time, focus on the third one, which is something that's been mentioned in previous meetings that seems to be of importance. Which properties does the city still own? There's much greater detail, we'll come back to that, in an executive report with lots of graphics and all the data and analyses and visualizations, and also in a companion paper that goes with this. Some acknowledgements first. All of our data analyses use content and data from Asheville. The land acquisition files at UNC Asheville, and the rest of the data is from the county. It's Buncombe County GIS, both parcel ownership and property cards, and Buncombe County Register of Deeds information. So before I get started, a challenge I have to mention. The biggest challenge has been connecting the pre and post urban renewal data. So I'm going to pick just one property quickly to illustrate why this is a huge challenge. If you look on the right at 10 Gillian Place, that's between South French Broad and Blanton, just north of Pfeiffer. That's that blue kind of shoe-like parcel. That's the current property. If you go back on the left, the study we did was in June 2022, last summer. If you go back to the left, you'll see June 1965. So what you should notice here is that in 1965, there were 8 properties that overlapped with 10 Gillian Place. I list the owners there and some pictures. 4 located on South Grove Street and 4 located on Blanton Street. And of course, neither do South Grove Street nor Dewitt Street exist anymore. So that's one of the challenges of relating the present from things that are now obscured very often or even invisible. How did we solve that? Well, our solution was to calculate, this slide is a little more technical, but it's kind of behind the scenes, to calculate percentages of parcel overlap. So the goal was to understand how current parcels were assembled. And what we essentially did was a reverse engineering to map back to the past. And so if you look at the graph on the picture on the left, what we're essentially saying is that 10 Gillian Place was constructed with portions of those 8 parcels. And we characterize the portions, 35% of 1517, and down on the right-hand side, 2% of 1617. Doing that kind of calculation, that's automated, for modern current parcels in Asheville, allows us to tell kind of the origin story of all the current parcels and connect the past to the present. That's really been what's been missing. And now that we've been able to solve that, we can ask all kinds of research questions, such as the preliminary questions we're sharing with you tonight. So really quickly, what you learn by doing this kind of mapping is that 10 Gillian Place was repackaged over a 6-year period from 68 to 75, using 8 acquisition parcels at a calculated purchase cost of $23,000. It was resold 3 years later in 78 for $5,400. And in the afterlife, in June 2022, that one property is valued by the county, so it's all county city data, close to $350,000. So this is what we did. We essentially did this kind of mapping, intersection, percentage overlap, not just for the yellow property data, but for all 224 current parcels, connecting them to the 930 acquisition parcels in our database. So let's tackle the questions now. Who was affected by urban renewal? Well, you saw that in Myeong's presentation. From our database, we can draw a list of all the former owners and renters. So this potentially speaks to the question of who was affected or who was harmed. We can identify individuals, their families. B, how much did the city of Asheville pay for urban renewal properties? So we have lots of graphics, but here's an executive summary. The total acquisition parcel was a little over $6 million across all 930 acquisition parcels. The median acquisition parcel value was just a little over $5,000, meaning that half of the owners were offered more than $5,000, half were offered less. But the important number is that 85% of all the acquisitions were below 10K. So it really shows you kind of the range where properties were purchased. C, which properties does the city still own? So to answer this question, we went back to one additional city data set. This was something published June 3rd, 2021 by the city of Asheville. And they released a story map website showing all the city-owned properties that came from urban renewal. If we go to that website on the left, you see that there are 13 properties, based according to the city, on the south side that are still owned by the city. So we took, those are the orange and then one fuchsia parcel on the left. So we took those 13 parcels, dropped them on our map, and we also used the 1963 Asheville Historical City Directory or phone book. So what I'm going to show you in the next minute or two, we're going to zoom into one of those 13 parcels, parcel number 4 on the right, the one that's fuchsia colored. So that's zooming into city parcel number 4, also known as Future Nasty Branch Greenway. As of June 2022, it appeared to be vacant. That's located along the Town Branch Greenway, bounded by South French Broad Avenue and Congress Street and Gaston Street, west and east, and Choctaw Street, Livingston Street, north and south. As you know, it's just north of the former Livingston Street School. If we take this parcel, this single city-owned parcel, and show the impact of urban renewal on that parcel, we get a much clearer idea of what happened. If you look at the impact on businesses, there are at least We know there are more, but there are at least 23 businesses were erased. These include grocery stores, churches, restaurants, beauty parlors, barber shops, etc. If you look at the impact of city parcel number 4 on the loss of homes, from our database, we identified 34 acquisition parcels. We show the pictures of the homes, and there's some absolutely beautiful homes here. It's pristine properties. So what can we conclude from that? Well, when we try to measure the impact of city-owned properties, if you do that kind of overlap, not just for number 4, but for all 13 of those city-owned parcels, you come up with 169 acquisition parcels that were affected. This represents 18% of the original pool of the 930 acquisition parcels. So it's really significant, and it puts things in a different perspective. If we go one step further and we look at Housing Authority of the City of Asheville, HACA-owned properties, there's 7 of them. Of course, you recognize Erskine, Livingston Heights, Walton, Livingston Street, etc. If you take those 7 parcels, they intersect or overlap with 147 formerly acquisition parcels. That's an additional 16% of the original pool of 930 acquisition parcels. So if you combine those two effects of HACA-owned and city-owned properties, there's a 34% combined in urban renewal impact. This is just for 20 modern or current parcels. So those parcels were repackaged during urban renewal into these very, very large chunks, but they overlap with 316 properties. This represents over a third of the original pool of 930 acquisition parcels. So the group believes that this is really an indication of the depth of the legacy of urban renewal in Asheville. It's not a few parcels, it's a few modern parcels, but over a third of the original pool that is still owned, lease controlled. Okay, I'm gonna move a little faster here because we only have a few minutes left. How much are those properties now worth? We did a systematic analysis and came up with about a 400% increase in the valuation of these current 224 parcels since urban renewal. This is after inflation adjustment. We used inflation adjustment calculators. And this is all based on Buncombe County's parcel ownership dashboard. That's a very conservative increase. We did a few studies for parts of the neighborhood where we looked at commercial valuations like Zillow, and the percentage of increase in valuation is even higher, up to 1,000% in some areas. This indicates that urban renewal really deprived the Southside homeowners of a significant source of intergenerational wealth. And for the first time, we have data in numbers that can be audited and looked at and examined, and we can ask other kinds of questions. This was an interesting question we were asked. When did the city start reselling these properties? So the process was repackaging all the acquisition properties into larger chunks. That's the 224. And the city and HACA, primarily HACA, but also the city, resold these repackaged, reconfigured parcels. This was a surprising finding, not just in the 70s and 80s, but over a 5-decade period. So while 86 of the repackaged parcels were resold immediately or very quickly in the 70s and 80s, there's another 14% that was offloaded in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. This is really worth looking at. And I'm going to finish with another question or so. We call the first round beneficiaries of the reselling of these repackaged properties repurchasers. And I'll show you why that matters next. So before I do that, one more research question. How much were these properties resold for? This was a very surprising finding. The repackaged parcels were resold at discounted prices. The median value of the resold parcels was less than a fifth of their acquisition value. This indicates that the majority of the repackaged parcels were first resold for a small fraction. As a matter of fact, 83% of the parcels were resold by HACA in the city below acquisition cost. And the total resale revenue was only $3 million as opposed to over $6 million for the acquisition. And this is, I think, our last question. Who was able to repurchase these properties? So we did an analysis of the first round. It's almost like the first stock buyers, the first round of repurchasers, categorized them as follows. 46% of them were individuals, 40% of them were businesses. The city shows up 7% of the time, HACA 3% of the time, churches 3%, county 1%. Out of the 224 repackaged parcels, there were 152 unique repurchasers, which means you had serial buyers, or people who bought many properties. In the top 10 repurchasers, were responsible for buying almost a third of all 224 repackaged parcels. None of the top 10 repurchasers were individuals. They were real estate businesses, property management businesses, companies, etc. Only 14 individuals who lost their property in the South Side, based on our database, were able to come back in the first round and repurchase a property. We saw one of them, I think Nance fell in that category, her family, after losing their property. These 14 individuals represent 9% of the 152 unique repurchasers. So what you see here is that there wasn't much success for individuals to come back, at least in the first round. And I'm going to conclude here and pass the mic back to Priscilla for her final words. I hope this information was useful.
That concludes our presentation. You can find more information, more specific information at urbanrenewalimpact.org. Again, that's urbanrenewalimpact.org. We focused on the South Side because that's where I was born and raised, and it captured my attention as I looked at the Urban Renewal files at UNC Asheville Special Collection. You will also find the link to the full executive summary and resources that Dr. Marciano shared. And again, I thank you, the Reparations Commission. I want to acknowledge the mayor being here, the city manager, and the county staff. Thank you all, and thank you, Madam Connie, for giving us the time.
Thank you.
So before you leave, Ms. Robinson, I would like to open it up for questions. If anybody have any questions or would like any more information.
I just want to make a comment real quick. Oh, I'm sorry. Was it somebody else? Okay. I want to tell you, Ms. Robinson, Ms. Priscilla, thank you for the work that you've been doing on this. Before anybody sat at this table, I remember you sharing this presentation with those two gentlemen. With me, it probably wasn't in the form that it is in now, but I just wanted to say, even then, it was sobering, but the work that you're doing lets us know that this work can be done. These numbers can come out. It's not hard to find. Average, everyday lay folk can find it. And I'm just so happy that people like you are out there doing this when people aren't watching you, people aren't asking you to do it. And I just really appreciate it because it made my job a lot easier. And just thank you. What you done was hella dope. I really appreciate it, but it's also sobering. And if nobody has ever told you, we appreciate you, I appreciate you. So thank you.
Ms. Priscilla, would you be interested in coming back to our housing meeting and discussing some of these issues with us?
I think that would be a great time for economic development and housing to have a joint meeting. And as those things directly overlap, and the quantification of the loss together with the target, maybe say for the future, if we could link those two groups together
Yes.
for that, it would save time for her and allow us to work together with profound numbers.
Ms. Robinson, very much aware that you did Southside because it was personal to you. That was not the only community within the African American community to be involved and to be torn up with urban renewal. Do you have plans to do any other communities?
If I'm invited to do so. From my understanding, East End they have someone already looking at the files. So I would be more than happy to collaborate with them in other communities to kind of guide in how and what we did.
Thank you.
Most of this is about the owners who own property, but we know that, well, I would like to know the percentage of blacks that own property in the 1940s during urban renewal, and also what happened to the renters. Where did they go?
Okay, from my understanding, what I can see, what I determined, there were three main groups impacted. You had the homeowners, you had those who rented, so they were very happy about going to housing. And then you had the renters, you had the homeowners, and you had the landlords. And I'll tell you this is just my own opinion. The blighted homes that we saw were a result of slum landlords. And out of that, the certificate of occupancy was born. So now, today, the houses have to be inspected and deemed in livable condition.
Part of our history, when they opened up all of the projects in the 50s and 60s, was that for a lot of us, those project structures were better than the homes they came from. They were so dilapidated, so torn down.
Well, if you were to look on the website and look up Little John, Bernice Little John, you would see that her home was in perfect condition. And she was a widow whose home was taken, and she was placed in the high-rise that is still now active on Southwich Broad. A lot of those homes were in perfect condition. A lot of those homes had gardens. There was no food desert. No one went hungry and no one was homeless. It was a community that stuck together. And I venture to say, once we integrated in other communities where we were not wanted, as I think D. Williams stated, it was a nightmare. Thomas McCall, if you look up his book, he named it Them, and he talked about how moving into a Caucasian community, and he would peep out at them, and he knew they were peeping out back at them. And then another book I would like to recommend is Dr. Mindy Fuller's book. She talks about how tearing up communities impact the health, the mental status. I mean, she goes down the line. She doesn't just focus on housing. So that would be a good book to get and to read. And actually, it would be awesome if you could bring her here to speak or have her speak, using as we use. She came here some years ago when we first started this conversation, but I think it would really be worth you listening to her as a speaker.
I want to thank you again for coming and presenting and your team. Like, that was awesome, and I'm super excited to hear how the project has grown, because it is amazing, and thank you again. And so we will now,
I have one question.
oh, sorry.
I think you said you had 14 copies of the course. Can we as a commission get more copies?
Is that like that one of yours?
Second,
How would that work?
can you repeat
I'd
that?
like to have one.
I'm gonna.
She got 13 copies, but if anybody else wanted copies or extra copies, could we as a commission?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Logan. Ms. Robinson. Book title is